Hello everyone and welcome to this new tutorial by MKS BEAM. Today we're going to look at how we can create Rhino blocks and exporting them into Revit as families, because Rhino blocks are always considered families. We'll also have a look on how we can assign to specific properties and parameters using BEAM, and then updating our geometry into Revit in case the design change. So after you install BEAM in your computer, make sure you visualize the BEAM property window by clicking into Options, and then BEAM will appear at the top of the list. So in this case, we have the BEAM top ribbon, where we can edit and manage, let's say, all the parameters and the families and the properties of our geometry here in Rhino. And then using the ribbon at the bottom, we can export them into Revit as families or IFC. So in this case, we're going to use the tool BEAM blocks because I created this parametric facade using Rhino blocks. And as you can see, I have one type which is called Unit 1, and BEAM automatically assign this block to a specific family by keeping the same type of name and a different mark. So in this case, it's still Unit 1 because I mirrored my geometry, but they have a different mark. And this mark is very helpful in case you want to edit or select the specific geometry, for example, using Grasshopper or Rhino. This is the second type of block that I create, which is called corner unit, and as you can see is under family corner unit and with a different mark. Why is it important to work with blocks? It's because every time we have a repetitive element throughout our project, there is the possibility of, for instance, adding a specific geometry to our blocks, or for example, we can change the material or we can change the geometry, and this will be updated throughout all the blocks with the same name. At the same time, as you can see, if I go on render view, I have the specific material, which is brass, applied to my cladding, and if I change it, let's say to aluminum, this change will happen throughout all my blocks. Let's say I also want to change the cladding of my corner units to aluminum. And this material, as you can see, are already existing in Rhino. So you can just select them using the drop-down menu. Now, if you go, for instance, to the F tool, as you can see, I can select by clicking on top of the family name all the blocks that I have in my Rhino document, and I can assign using BEAM specific family parameters as an instance as a type. So in this case, under comment, I want to assign the stage of the project, which is stage DD, and then workset is workset 1 that already exists in my Revit file. I want also to apply a family parameter as a type. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to apply a generic one. So for example, MKS K01, and then MKS type mark 1. I'm going to do the same for my corner units. So I can select corner units, and let's apply the stage of the project under comment. I'm going to place them in workset 1, and here we can apply a very generic one, for example, MKS K02 and MKS type mark 2. So now I'm ready to export my blocks. If we go on the blocks tool, as you can see, I can select these blocks manually by selecting one by one, or with a multiple selection and then enter with my keyboard. Otherwise, the second option, which is a preferred one, is selecting blocks using the definition. So in this case, by clicking on show block thumbnail, we can visualize the render view of our blocks, and we can also preview the selection. So in this case, I'm selecting the coordinate units, and I'm selecting the units 1. By hitting OK, now I'm ready to export my blocks, and I can call them parametric facade. The beam now is complete. If I go into Revit, beam is visible in our top ribbon, and in this case we're going to use the block tool. The latest file that we exported from Rhino is always placed at the top of our drop-down menu in a chronological order, and then by keeping the same type, in this case of settings, we can just beam our geometry and import our blocks as Revit families. So as you can see, now we have unit 1, which is a family unit 1, and the same type of parameters are assigned accordingly, as well as the materials, aluminium and glass, and as well as our coring units that are in a different family called coring unit. Same type of custom parameters and materials. At the same time, as you can see, every time that I select, let's say, one of these families, I have also the possibility of seeing like the level where this family is placed. In this case, level 4, level 2, level 1, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, this will be basically the closest level plus a little offset. If I go back into Rhino, for instance, and let's say now I want to update the material of my cladding. So I want to change this cladding to brass, and this change will happen throughout all my blocks. I can basically update my parameters in Revit as well. So by going into families, I can select my specific families. In case, let's say, I also want to change the family parameter to stage, let's say, CD. And now I'm able to export my block by, in this case, selecting only the unit ones, and then OK. I'm going to call it unit 1 update beam. Let's go back into Revit and then blocks. In this case, by keeping the standard settings, as always, the latest file is always placed at the top in a chronological order. So unit 1 update. Now by beaming it again, as you can see, the material is updated, as well as the comment, which is now stage CD. If I go back into Rhino, I have also the possibility of basically, let's say, I want to copy these 2 blocks, and because I just update, let's say, my design, and I want now to basically export these families into Revit as well. So what I can do, I can just select them. Let's say I also want to change, let's say, family parameter. I'm going to place them in stage ST, and now ready to be exported by selecting blocks. In this case, I need to select them manually, and I'm ready to export them as, let's call it facade update. The interesting thing now is that by going into block, I'm able to place these new families. So as you can see, the latest file is always placed at the top. By importing the families, now beam is going to replace basically all these existing families with the ones that we are porting, plus the location of the new ones. Or by clicking under Ctrl Z in this case, And if you go on use existing family, we have the possibility of selecting here, in this case, our unit 1 family that already exists into Revit. So what we're doing, we're basically, in this case, importing the 3 families in the same location by using an existing family that already exists into Revit. So by beaming it again, the process is faster, as you can see. So we just completed just 3 new imports. Now, another interesting thing that I can do using blocks is that I can basically create some blocks here in Rhino and populate my Revit file with some specific geometries. So as you can see, I have this chair that I already loaded into my main project. And let's say I want to populate this project using Rhino blocks. How I can do that? I can gonna create basically a cube that I will transform into a block. I'm gonna call it chair. And then here, now I can copy, let's say, my blocks around the project. So let's say I'm gonna copy it like this, because these will be our chairs in Revit. So in this case, as you can see, Beam also create the family by keeping the same type of name, chair. And now I'm able to select these blocks. So by definition, chair, I'm gonna beam them as chairs. And then by going back into Revit and then back to blocks, now the latest file, as always, is placed at the top in a chronological order, and then using an existing family, and then here by selecting the family which is my chair, so in this case is the dining chair, I'm able to populate my design using my chairs, as you can see, with a specific location of my blocks in Rhino. I can also update, for instance, the location of the chairs. So in case I want to, let's say, update, in this case, the location, and also I'm gonna move it up. I can keep my Rhino file, let's say, super light by using blocks in this case, and not, let's say, three-dimensional object with textures and with actual details. And then by exporting this again as chairs update, I have the possibility of, by using an existing family, which is in this case our dining chair, update the locations accordingly. Thank you for watching.